The state ramps up efforts to investigate election fraud and clean up registration rolls. That's raising concern about a chilling effect on voters.
What we want is our voters to say, these are fair, these are transparent, my vote counts.
We look closer at how the moves could affect voters and what you need to do now to make sure your vote counts in November. A new study looks at why it's getting harder to afford a home in Texas. We talked to the man behind the study and how it could lead to change from lawmakers. Texas musicians raise concerns about artificial intelligence stealing their sounds and styles.
And it's a fundamental violation that strikes at the heart of who we are and what we do as creators.
The call for action at the Capitol to regulate AI voices and videos.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. We're just over 2 months away from Election Day, and the state is ramping up efforts to clean up the voter rolls and investigate allegations of voter fraud. Those efforts are raising concern and accusations of voter intimidation. As Ryan Chandler reports, this all comes as state leaders work to reassure Texas voters that this year's election will be fair and secure.
This is point-blank voter intimidation.
In San Antonio Monday,
It is only voter suppression.
Hispanic civil rights group LULAC called for the DOJ to intervene in Texas's vote harvesting investigation after the Attorney General's office executed armed early morning raids into the homes of Latino election volunteers. Paxton says the search warrants are tied to allegations a Frio County official illegally harvested votes for local races. The accused deny that and worry the investigation could stifle legal efforts to help elderly voters get registered.
I'm not doing anything illegal. All I do is help the seniors.
The controversy comes as officials from both parties work to keep Texas elections secure and accessible.
What we want is our voters to say, these are fair, these are transparent, my vote counts. As a state, we need to be the gold standard for the country.
Governor Abbott touting a voter roll cleanup that canceled the registration of more than 1 million people, including 6,500 potential non-citizens and almost 500,000 dead people. The governor didn't specify if any of those had actually voted.
This false narrative that there's all these undocumented folks that are registering to vote, that our election system somehow is rigged, which is not.
Morales calls claims of election fraud scare tactics. Both parties encouraging people to vote with faith the system is fair.
I want our voters to know that their vote matters, their vote's going to be counted, and there's going to be transparency in the process.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
You heard Ryan mention how the governor is touting work to clean up the state's voter rolls. That effort canceled the registration of more than 1 million people. Most of those fell into one of two categories. First, people who died, but the largest number of canceled registrations came from people on the voter suspense list. That's when a county can't confirm the address of a registered voter. And a lot of Texas voters are currently on that list, more than 2.2 million, according to the Secretary of State's office. Being on the suspense list does not mean your registration will get canceled right away, but Will Dupree found out that it could cause headaches when you go to cast your ballot and what you can do to fix it.
Good evening.
When the Democratic National Convention kicked off last week, Nico Ramsey wanted to show how his friends could look up their voting information.
I was very excited and actually was just using it as a way to encourage my network to get out the vote, assuming it was going to be active.
What he ended up finding was this: his own registration status listed as suspense, which confused him.
It's not that descriptive on what that means. And it's kind of intimidating in a way to see will I still be able to vote? Did I miss out on something?
Texas reports of its nearly 18.3 million registered voters, about 12% are on this suspense list, meaning their counties are unsure if they moved.
I think suspense can sound like a scary word, and it's not. Actually, the suspense list is a way to protect voters.
Alicia Pierce with the Secretary of State's office says this helps remind people to correct their information. They can still vote while on this list, but when they go to the polls, it does mean either having to sign a statement of residence to share their latest address or casting a provisional ballot. Do you think there should be more done to notify people about that?
I think that this is a great service that you're doing here, helping to get the word out. Remember that the suspense list is actually a measure that protects voters.
Voters have until October 7th to update their voter registration info. And Nico Ramsey already submitted a new change of address form so that he can get off the suspense list.
Don't assume that your status might always be active. Double check and check often.
An important step to make sure your vote counts. Will Dupree, State of Texas.
State law requires counties to remove the names of those either not voting or those who fail to contact them after 4 years in that suspense status. We want to dig a little deeper. Joining us now for Insight is Joyce LeBombard, the president of the League of Women Voters of Texas. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So Joyce, the Secretary of State tells us more than 2 million Texans are on the suspense list. How do you know if you're on the list, and what do you do to make sure that you don't run into trouble when you go to vote?
So there's a couple of ways that you can check to see if your voter registration is in suspense. One is on votetexas.gov, and there's a button there called Am I Registered? You can also go to our interactive website, vote411.org, and there's a button there that says check your voter registration. They actually both bring you to the same app. And there you can see if your voter registration status is active. If you're on the suspense list, it will say suspense, and then that's when you know you need to do the next step.
You know, Governor Abbott has been touting efforts that removed more than 1 million people from the Texas voter rolls. That's raised some questions, but is there anything unusual or cause for concerns from that process that you're seeing?
I don't know if we're concerned quite yet. You know, it's over a 3-year period. And so while some of the numbers appear to be high when you take into consideration it's over a 3-year period, the numbers are very small. On the other hand, the non-citizenship number compared to other states is kind of high. And so, you know, we'd like to see some more transparency around those numbers, find out what the data sources were used for those non-citizenships, to make sure that naturalized citizens were not swept into that category when they are actually eligible to vote, like similar to what happened in 2019.
Yeah, and related to all that, the Attorney General has put an emphasis on fighting voter fraud and penalties for voting illegally. That's rare in Texas, we know, but it does have some people concerned. What do voters need to know or do to make sure their vote counts?
It is concerning, and it's concerning because we don't want to scare people who are eligible to not go to the polls. And so I think everyone should rest assured that, you know, if their voter registration is intact, or even if it has some other status, they should go talk to their voter registrar, get that straightened out before the election, if possible, on October 7th. But if you are on suspense, you can still vote. They will just have you fill out a form confirming what your address is, and then you can still go vote. But we are concerned that it might cause some people to not go vote, just based on some of the ways things are being phrased by the governor and the attorney general.
All right, good insight, good tips. Thank you very much, Joyce LeBombard, from the president of the League of Women Voters of Texas. I appreciate you being with us. A lawmaker in the Texas House is switching parties months after losing her primary. Houston Representative Sean Thierry announced she's joining the Republican Party. Last session, Thierry was one of only 4 Democrats who supported Senate Bill 14, which limits health care options for transgender minors. That vote became an issue for Democrats who worked to push her out of office. In a statement, Thierry wrote, "The Democratic Party has veered so far left, so deep into the progressive abyss, that it now champions policies that I cannot, in good conscience, support." Since Thierry lost her primary, she will not be in the Texas Legislature next session. The reaction from state Democrats basically said, good riddance. Trey Martinez-Fisher, who chairs the Texas House Democratic Caucus, wrote, "Sean Thierry was fired by the voters of House District 146 because she didn't respect their will and what they wanted for their community." Union organizer Lauren Ashley Simmons defeated Thierry in the Democratic primary runoff. She faces Republican Lance York in the November election. The district lines heavily favor Democrats. Simmons' campaign sent us a statement about theory switching parties, saying, "I'm glad she can finally live openly as her authentic self." It's getting harder to afford a home in Texas, but what can the state do about it? We talked to the man behind a new study that looks deeper at the problem and potential solutions.
Our goal is to increase our presence on the border, increase our tools, increase the barriers on the border.
Migrant crossings drop at the border, but hear why the governor still plans to ramp up building barriers.
Our goal is to increase our presence on the border, increase our tools, increase the barriers on the border until we reduce illegal crossings 100%.
Governor Greg Abbott says he plans to expand buoy barriers across the Rio Grande. He made those comments exclusively to our media partners at News Nation and outlined his plans. Governor Abbott says he expects a court to affirm the state's right to expand the use of the barriers. Right now, the linked concrete anchored buoys stretch roughly the length of 3 soccer fields near Eagle Pass. The Justice Department brought the broader lawsuit accusing Texas of violating federal law for blocking part of the river, as well as risking damaging U.S. foreign policy. Environmentalists have also raised concerns about potential ecological impacts. The governor said the state put a hold on plans to bus migrants from Texas to so-called sanctuary cities in other parts of the country. That comes after a sharp drop in border crossings since June. That's when President Biden issued an executive order that stopped granting asylum to most migrants. Governor Abbott told News Nation that crossings dropped so much there hasn't been the volume of people to send to other cities. But he said the state expects they'll need the buses again soon.
We stand ready and prepared to start the busing operations again if people make the mistake of coming into the state of Texas. Our goal, however, is not to have to bus anybody because we want to deter anybody from even coming into the state of Texas.
The migrant busing program started in 2022 as part of Operation Lone Star. According to the governor's office, the state has bused more than 100,000 migrants to other states. Texas leads the country in home building permits, so why is it getting harder to afford a home here? The state comptroller is digging into the problem. Now he's joining us to talk about his new report and how it could lead to solutions in the next session. AI tools can mimic the styles and sounds of your favorite musicians. Some of those artists want to shut that down. What they're asking lawmakers to do to protect creators. Texas is short more than 300,000 homes, and that's adding to the state's housing crisis. That's according to a new report from the Comptroller's office. The State Housing Affordability Challenge report shows new home developments did not keep up with the fast-growing population. Challenges the report pointed out include a surge in home prices and rising interest rates between 2021 and 2023, a lack of investment in the state's housing supply, and its impact on low and middle income families. Additional costs of owning a home also pose a challenge. One example is home insurance premiums and disagreements on zoning ordinances between policymakers at the state and local levels. Those ordinances can determine the types of housing that can be built and where. We want to go a little deeper into this report. Joining us for Insight is State Comptroller Glenn Hegar. Welcome.
It's good to be with you today.
Thank you for being here. Well, the report found the state has an underinvestment in housing, even though Texas has been the top state for new building permits for more than a decade. What needs to change to get the supply to meet demand?
Yeah, there's several things. Obviously, with higher interest rates right now, that's not something the state or local governments can control. That is obviously one impediment to entry into the market. The 40-year high inflation has readjusted prices, which means prices are higher. But one of the biggest components that we have to address is one, recognition that there has been less supply than we need. And with the growth of the state occurring, people move into the state every single day, we need to make sure that we're adding more supply both in single and multifamily home. In other words, if not, Texas unfortunately is becoming less affordable than we have in the past. That has been an economic plus for Texas is affordability. But the fact is we need to be able to make more housing available, both single family and multifamily residences. And what that means in large part is dealing with local zoning laws as well as the time that it takes permitting to get these applications and these houses being built.
Yeah, how does Texas compare to other states when it comes to housing affordability? Are there lessons we can take from other states?
You know, Texas, at least from my vantage point as a CFO for the state of Texas, and talking about, say, for example, our credit rating, one of the things that we've talked about during my tenureship is Texas being more affordable than other states. Now, what we've had to say over that time is Texas is becoming less affordable, but we are still more affordable than other states. And so this report was really important from my vantage point to try to raise the level of this awareness that as we continue to grow, this is an issue that we really need to focus, have more attention on, because when people don't have as much money because they are spending more on housing, they don't have quite the disposable income, and that impacts their quality of life. That impacts their economic opportunities they have for them as well as their family members. And this is something that doesn't quite get the attention that maybe road congestion, making sure that we have water, quality public education, higher education. Those are all things that are components for a strong economy, but affordable housing is equally important as many of these other topics.
Your report noted that other costs associated with owning a home have risen sharply. Insurance is one, for example. What type of problem are we looking at here? You know, how big is it, and what can people do about it?
Yeah, there's several different components that have resulted in kind of where we're at, whether it's insurance prices, interest rates, as we talked about, whether it's property taxes, which the legislature has taken several steps to address that issue over the course of the last legislative sessions. Obviously, interest rates will kind of come down, but when it comes to homeowners insurance, the state playing a role to make sure that, one, we make sure that we have insurance companies that are here and there's not policies that are driving them away, therefore meaning less competition and ability to have players into the market, but also making sure that rates don't rise substantially higher, and making sure that as a state, we tend to the most important issues, whether it's flooding, whether it's mitigation of dealing with flooding issues along the coastal areas or hailstorms. How do we deal with those natural disasters that we're going to have, and have the emergency and the preparedness to handle those kind of issues on a timely fashion?
All right, well, we're just a few months away from the next legislative session, just believe it or not, right? You've said that your office will work with lawmakers to address this issue. How will you do that, and what will you push for?
Yeah, the first thing that I wanted to do is bring a greater awareness that this issue is equally as important or more important in the long term than several other issues to the economic affordability of the average Texan in this state, those that live here and those that want to come here for an economic opportunity. But also the next steps are finding what are the more targeted solutions that we can help resolve affordability in the long run. And that's the next step that we'll work with the legislature on.
All right, Comptroller Glenn Hegar, thank you for being with us. I appreciate it.
Always good to be with you.
An update now to a story we've been following. Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing the city of Dallas. It's because of the state fair's ban on guns. The fair banned firearms after a shooting last year injured 3 people. The state fair leases the fairgrounds from the city of Dallas. Paxton says state law allows gun owners to carry firearms on government land. Paxton released a statement saying, in part, neither the city of Dallas nor the State Fair of Texas can infringe on Texans' right to self-defense. The city of Dallas released its own statement noting that the state fair is a private event and that the city was not involved in the fair's weapons policy.
AI fakes don't care if you're famous, an actor, a recording artist, or even if you're alone, alive or dead. AI frauds and deepfakes affect everyone.
A country singer takes center stage at the Capitol, calling for action. Why lawmakers are looking closer at the risk of AI mimicking the sounds and styles of Texas artists. Texas artists are raising concerns about the impact of artificial intelligence. Musicians see the threat of AI-generated voices and videos that mimic the styles and sounds they created. Now, state lawmakers are considering more rules around the emerging technology. Ryan Chandler looks closer at the concerns and the call for action.
Josh Abbott is proud of his Texas roots.
The tradition of music in Texas and the way it has impacted the entire country, if not world, over decades now is vast. Right?
At the Capitol Tuesday, Abbott warned lawmakers his signature Texas tunes could be taken over by AI.
And it's a fundamental violation that strikes at the heart of who we are and what we do as creators.
That may sound like country, but it's just code. imitating the voice and the lyrical style of a real artist. Lawmakers now have their sights on regulating AI to protect intellectual property.
If we don't protect artists, we won't have any art. We don't have any art, whole civilization dies. I don't want to be melodramatic, but really it's what we are. It's what we are.
In the self-proclaimed live music capital of the world, the Texas Capitol is behind other states in protecting artists. Earlier this year, Tennessee signed the Elvis Act into law at a Broadway bar. Now Texas lawmakers anticipate a series of bills to regulate AI next year, codifying copyrights for artists here.
We're going to have to look at broad social issues in terms of not just regulating AI, but how do we respond to changes in the economy that affect people?
The brands of songwriters and musicians and singers across Texas, they define our state. That's the music that we listen to as a culture. And so if you think about it from that perspective, it really puts a high importance and priority on protecting those people.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
Lawmakers in Washington introduced a bill in January to protect individuals' likeness and voice. It's called the No AI Fraud Act. The bill has bipartisan support. Texas Republican Nathaniel Moran and Democrat Henry Cuellar are among the co-sponsors. The bill is currently pending in the House Judiciary Committee. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.